primary objective is to take people into the coolest parts of that area and show them, the most exquisite scenery and the most epic adventure.
Welcome to the Dark Zone, an event racing podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. In event racing lingo, a dark zone is a time when, due to darkness or safety, teams are paused on the course before continuing with the race. During that time, stories are exchanged, friendships are kindled, spirits are restored, and teams have a chance to prepare for the next challenge. We hope that you make good use of this dark zone. We're glad that you're here. Hello, dear listeners. This is episode number 41 of the Dark Zone, an event racing podcast. Today we are joined by Yishai Horowitz. Yishai is the race director for the USARA National Championships coming this September in Bishop, California. I get him on the podcast. I try to get some info out of him. He paints a great picture of the course, and this is going to be a heck of a race. Thanks to Yishai for coming on the Dark Zone. Always a pleasure to host race directors, racers, race fans, racers of all types. This is a fun episode. Yishai gives just enough information to make it sound super appealing. So check the show notes if you want to learn more about the USARA National Championships. And thank you for being a listener to the Dark Zone. We appreciate having you here. Safe racing and enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. Today we are joined by Yishai Horowitz. Yishai is the race director for the 2022 edition of the United States Adventure Racing Association National Championships. This year, USARA is voting with their feet and is going to the left coast, to the west coast of America, out in California. Yishai has been kind enough to come onto the Dark Zone today to talk about the race, the preparation. He can't talk a lot about the course. He can talk a little bit about the course. We'll see what we can get out of him. But for the most part, Yishai's here to talk about nationals and what racers could expect. Yishai, welcome to the Dark Zone. Thank you for making the time to join us today.
Hey, Brian. Thank you. It's an honor to be on the Dark Zone with you.
Nationals absolutely is the premier event that takes place in the country in terms of national championship. We're blessed in America, especially over the last several years. We're just more and more races, right? No matter where you live. Katie Farrington just had her Never Summer Adventure race out in the Rocky Mountains, and we look at the races that take place in the Southeast. We see the races that in the Northeast, Endless Mountains, Expedition Oregon, our friends to the north in Canada, right? We're a vibrant race series. Rib Mountain was just on. I mean, you can just go down the list. Strong Machine with Maine, everything everywhere. Del Mar, a 1,000 great races out there, a really vibrant scene in America. It all kind of comes together, right? The Nationals is all about the racer, getting them on the course, getting them talking a bit about it. You got to be pumped. You got to be excited. Tell us about Nationals. Where are we going to be? How's it going to go? Yishai, the audience podcast is yours. Take it away.
Hey, thank you. That's quite the intro. So national championships out here on the West Coast, it's been a long time. I think the last time they visited the left coast was down in Santa Barbara. I mean, that was 10 plus years ago. I was actually at that race, but yeah, it's really, I'm very humbled to be given the opportunity to direct nationals this year. I think it's a really great honor. Actually, I've been wanting to do it for a long time, and finally Garrison's like, "Hey, do you want to do it out here?" I'm like, "Yes, please." So we got it. That being said, California terrain is very different than, East Coast, Midwest. The mountains where we're going to be are probably more similar to like, the Rockies, if anything, if you want to make some kind of comparison. But this year's race is going to be a point-to-point, I guess more expedition-y styled. Obviously, it's not an expedition race. It's a 24 to 30 hour race, but it's a point-to-point race, and we have a good number of transition areas. So you're not going to be in one leg for a third of the race or something like that. It's going to be pretty quick. And those transition times are going to count a lot for this. I think we're going to be at like 7 or 8 transition areas for a 24-hour race. So that's we're going to keep moving. So this year we're going to be up at some high elevation also. So participants that are not necessarily used to high elevations, practice. If you can get up in altitude, come out a few days before if you can, sleep high. I don't know much about like hypo-oxygen tents or anything like that, so I'm not going to promote
we're
that.
all adventure racers. It's going to stink. Suck it up and keep racing, right? It's
Exactly.
going to be all the slow landers are going to pay the price. That's the way it goes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the first leg of the race, I feel like a lot of people are going to get slapped in the face because you go really high, really quick. But we're gonna have you covered. There's a lot of. It's actually a net loss in altitude over the whole race. So a lot of downhilling. There are obviously uphills, but the other thing is some really rugged terrain. There's some terrain that there's no trails through necessarily, and you're just going to be you're going to be going for it. There's a big canyoneering section. It's pretty short as far as mileage goes, but Cyril and I went out this past weekend. We did it and it took us like 6 hours to get through a pretty short leg of it. So it's pretty full on. There's also some really nice technical single track. It's not like downhill scary technical single track, but if you're just used to riding fire roads, get on some single track if you can. It's rocky, it's some roots. And that part of the Sierra has a lot of sandiness to it. So, I mean, you can still ride through it. It's fine, but you're going to be wanting to run a wider tire than, you might be running out on some hard pack stuff or hero dirt per se. So, like a 2.3, 2.4 inch tire will help you a lot.
So when I was a newer adventure racer and I was coming into the sport, when I saw the phrase national championship, immediately I went to the idea that because I was a citizen racer, because I was a weekend warrior, I didn't qualify for nationals. That nationals was somebody else's. There was this mystical realm, if you will, of adventure racer who I did not know, who did not know me, and they got to go race nationals.
Yeah.
Now, in an earlier version of the podcast, Garrison, who's the executive director of USARA, came on and talked about the selection process for nationals this year. Mm-hmm. And I think, and I want to kind of lead a bit with the end of the sentences. I'm correct in the idea that anybody who wants to race nationals, and it's July of 2022, by the way, for those of you time pressed, and we're going to push this edition out as soon as possible. Entries are open now for nationals. Am I right that anybody who can get a team together and talk a bit about the size of the teams, talk a bit about the distance of the race in terms of hours as well as mileage-ish, I know is what you could say. Can anybody sign up and come out and race nationals?
Yes. Now it's open registration. If you have a 3-person co-ed team, come on out and race. It's not limited to those, elite racers. And in my opinion, we don't have a whole lot of elite teams in the nation. So I think that a lot of people would be surprised at, hey, they can come out and they can race and they can finish a 24-hour race.
Is it 24 or is it 30 hours? How long is the course open?
Sorry, it's 24 to 30 hours. It's a 30-hour cutoff. So yeah, sorry, I keep using the 24-hour reference. It's just kind of like the easy go-to. But yeah, it is technically a 30-hour race. So 30 hours is the cutoff.
And I think you're tipping your hand a little bit, the idea that you're using 24 hours. There are teams that are come out there that are going to move quickly through the course, and they're going to fall probably on the earlier side of the 24-hour to 30-hour margin, whereas some teams, present company included, is probably going to be at the end of the more closer to the 30-hour mark. Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that. We are designing the course to take good, fast teams, close to, we want them to be out there for a long time. We don't want anybody to be finishing in like 16 hours, 17 hours. So, they're going to have a full race. So fast teams don't expect to be finished in 15, 16, 17 hours.
Especially if they're coming out from the East Coast or for lower elevations and they're racing at elevation.
Yes,
exactly. You mentioned, I heard canyoneering, I heard technical single track, not scary downhilly stuff, but with sandiness. What other disciplines can teams reasonably, what have you shared with the race community in terms of what other disciplines to prepare for?
There's a great paddling. Actually, there's 2 paddling legs. So there's going to be some flat water paddling and there's some slightly moving paddling. It's like class 1 river. It pushes river. You along.
It flows downhill. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And
so we have 2 paddling legs, canyoneering, technical single track. Obviously, I'm assuming there's a significant trekking section.
Yeah, there's trekking section.
Now, we don't want to say too much, right? Because for those of you who are newer to the sport, if this is your first time tuning into the Dark Zone, one of the components of adventure racing is that the racers don't learn about the course specifically until the race begins. They're given a set of maps.
Correct.
Have you determined, and once again, I don't want you to give away trade secrets, and so feel free to say, Brian, I'm not talking about that. When would racers get the maps that morning? Is it at the hour before? Is it are you getting off the bus? Good luck. Here's your map, people. Like, how are you going to put that together?
We haven't fully decided that one yet. One thing that I do like to do is not give all maps at, the beginning of the race. If that's, if map handout is the night before or the morning of, I like to have a little bit more mystery involved. So they'll probably be one of the map handouts will be a little bit later in the course.
And the idea of the map distribution is interesting for two aspects. And that's a great thing that a lot of race directors do. You're doing your racers a favor in one way because you're not giving them X amount of maps to figure out at the very start.
Exactly.
Right? So therefore there's no paralysis, by analysis, right? Here's 4 maps, 5 maps. I'm picking a number out of the air. Good luck. Yeah. You're going to get maps 6 through 8 or 6 and 7 later on in the course. You're helping them out. The downside and the challenge is that they're now going to be in a race situation and someone's going to say to them, here are your new maps. Good luck. And you have to do that together. You have to figure that out right away on the course.
Yeah, correct. There's an advantage and a disadvantage. I like to do it because there's an advantage and a disadvantage. It gives, it's good for some teams and not so great for other teams. But
in terms of the teams that are planning on coming out, there's several nationally ranked teams.
Yes.
Bend, Rootstock. Do you happen to have a current registration list that you could talk about who's already coming out? What does the field look like?
I don't have a current one. The last one I saw was a few months ago.
Okay.
I saw Bones on there. Bones came out and did our Mammoth race last year and they won. They're a very strong team. I don't believe Mary is racing with them this year. I think she's going to be at Worlds.
Okay. So that would be Mary Chandler, by the way, previous guest on the Dark Zone. Great episode. Okay.
Yeah. Mary's an incredible racer.
Yeah. So, I like to say that Superman wears Mary Chandler PJs to bed. Yes. I mean, she's just a racer all the time and just put that episode on repeat and train to it all day long, right? But Mary's Mary,
Mary's superhuman.
She's superhuman, right? She's a Cyberdyne Systems 9000. God bless her, right? Go Mary.
So actually one of the, my buddy who's helping me put the race on, Cyril J. Rand, was one of Mary's regional teammates from Dart Noon. So we have some high caliber racers helping out with this race.
Yeah, it sounds like you're putting together a very a significantly challenging course. Yeah. For people who are considering making the leap and coming out, we've talked about the idea that it's open now. So there was a graduated entry process where teams that qualified with higher and higher standards, it was like as the calendar moved on, it was like Section A could register, Section B, Section C, and as long as spaces remained, it's now open registration. What are the dates of the race?
So it's September 16th and 17th. It's a Friday, Saturday race. So we start Friday morning and we end Saturday afternoon, Saturday morning, depending on how fast you go.
And where would teams fly into? Well, first off, the headquarters is in Bishop.
Yeah, Bishop, California. It's a very small town on 395, about 45 minutes south of Mammoth Mountain, which is somewhat known. I mean, it's pretty well known.
And what's the mountain range? Is it the Sierra Nevadas?
It's the Sierra Nevada. Yeah.
Okay. When we discussed on the Dark Zone about a year ago, when Garris and I, one of our earlier podcasts, talked about the race, he had talked about the need for there to be 2 sets of courses because of fire danger.
Yes.
That a thing where, what's the update with that?
Yes. So we do actually have a backup location. I don't know if I'm really supposed to disclose that at this point. There is, the Sierra burns every year. And there's smoke. I mean, there's a fire going on right now just outside of Yosemite. And I was in Mammoth. I was in Bishop this past weekend, and it got a little bit smoky. Looking at the air quality index, it's fine in Mammoth right now, fine in Bishop. most of Mammoth and Bishop are on the eastern side of the Sierra, and the fires generally are on the western slope where there's more trees. The problem is you get the wind blowing it over the mountain range, and you get smoke in that big Owens Valley. So, yeah. It's also kind of interesting because the mountain range there kind of creates some microclimate action. So, the western side can get smoky, the higher elevations can get a little bit smoky, but then when you go down in elevation, it clears up. So it's hard to determine what the, I guess, go, no go would be. If there's one part of the course that's a small section that might not have the best air quality, but everything else is fine, probably continue with the race. Obviously, if the whole place is inundated with smoke and it's in like purple air quality index range, we're going to not do it. The one issue with the backup location is we have to have a month kind of go, no go time for that. So we're actually getting pretty close. I mean, it's, July 26th right now, and the race is a little over a month. So we would have to make that call pretty soon if we are going to use that backup location. And so that was mainly set up if there was another all forest closure, which there was last year. However, last year it did end before September. So before the race, which is very scary. You'd hate to be like, oh, it's a week away. Is it going to open? Is it not? I don't know. So it's a little bit of a gamble. I admit that, we're going to do everything we can to have the race go and obviously go safely, in not only, fire safety, but air quality safety. We don't want to put anybody in danger that.
Yeah. And I think that you're in the first things first, great job having a backup location.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard enough to plan one race.
Yeah.
But planning two races.
Yeah.
And I would bet, and I'm not involved in these conversations, that it's a month notice, but we all know that deadlines are deadlines and we use these round numbers, right?
Yes.
And I think as people who access the outdoors, love the outdoors, use the outdoors, I think we've all come to accept the idea that with the changing nature of the climate, the changing nature of what our summers are, that we've come to recognize that this is just the reality of what we have to do, and we have to wrap our heads around it.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. There's a whole crew of us that are going over to Scotland in about 2.5 weeks to go race Iterra. Mm-hmm. We're talking about COVID safety, the fact that we're making it a point now to wear masks in public, the fact that we don't want to get sick before the race.
Yeah.
And as discomforting as this is, I think there's no better breed of people that are designed for this than adventure racing, right? Because we all know, and we've all been there, that sometimes the race just goes upside down. And then we just have to figure it out. And so I think that we're well suited to that.
Yeah.
But if the race were to be today, you're all green. The race
All
goes
green.
Today, right? All green, right? And so let's see what that looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that, like I said, and bench racers are a flexible bunch.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. And I would argue too, with the breadth of the course that you have here and the backup course that you have, there's no doubt in my mind that folks who have the time and capacity and the ability to come out and race nationals, it feels like they're going to get a heck of a race.
Oh yeah, it's going to be fantastic. So I can't.
What do you expect to be the distance? Have you done a mileage distance on the race?
Yeah, it's about 115 miles.
Okay, that's pretty hardy for.
It's pretty long for 24
that's a lot
hours.
Okay, I would make it a point to put extra air in my tires because 150 miles of trekking. And one thing we don't do, it's not worth our while. Rarely do we compare races, right? Because an Endless Mountains to a Bend to an Expedition Canada,
it's hard.
It's different.
Yeah.
But races have flavors.
Sure.
And some races, and so as you look back now, and I mean, and for the aspiring race director out there, there's the only thing that's more fun than racing a race is planning a race. It's kind of like, it gives you an ulcer and it causes you nerves and worries, don't get me wrong. But sitting there and looking at maps and checkpoints and in your head saying, does this go here? Does this go there? Yeah. Planning a race is tremendously enriching and fun and challenging.
Yes.
How would you describe the flavor of this nationals? What adjectives would you wrap around it for the listener?
So when I design a course, my primary objective, obviously there's like the safety aspect of stuff, but that's not what I'm talking about right now. My primary objective is to take people into the coolest parts of that area and show them, the most exquisite scenery and the most epic adventure. I am not one to put people through just endless miles of grueling, steep, dusty fire roads or something like that. I don't like that. I like to take people between the gems of what the area has to offer. So the flavor of this, I think, reflects that kind of idea of course design. I think that there's a lot of fun aspects of it. I mean, obviously it's a long course. It's, you're going to be out there for 30 hours. So there's going to be it's grueling. I mean, you're going out there to suffer.
It's supposed to be. Right. Good job. If someone says that was a grueling race, it's like, well, thanks. Here's your racers cross the finish line, you give them a comment card. They write down grueling. Thank you. You signed up for this. It should be grueling.
Exactly. It's like, I don't know, somebody signs up to be a Navy SEAL and be like, that was hard training. Be like,
If somebody says to you after a 30-hour race, that was kind of grueling, kind of like you signed up for an adventure race. This isn't we're not sewing. No disrespect to the sewers out there, but you know what I mean. So it sounds to me as you talk about it, we just had Igor on from AOR Croatia.
Yeah,
and
I heard that.
Igor's race was top notch. One thing he talked about in his hilarious Croatian way, what he talked about was his job is to expose the racers to the beauty of Croatia. Yes. And therefore he wants flowing, he wants fasting.
Yes.
He doesn't just put flags far, far away. He wanted, I'll paraphrase, he wanted every checkpoint to give the racers pause and say, oh my God, this is amazing. He also had like 78 checkpoints over 3 days. I don't know how he did that. I mean, he should talk to somebody about that because that's incredible. But I think you and Igor are sort of similar in that regard, that you see the course as a playground. Yes. And you want to bring the racers through the playground along the way.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Thank you for that. The other thing that I really appreciate is a lot of route choices. So unlike Igor, we do not have 70 plus checkpoints out there. I mean, obviously this is a 1-day race versus a 3-day race, but I use the checkpoints really as just kind of to get people to destinations and to give them choices. So pretty much not all of them, but the majority of our checkpoints, there's multiple ways to get there. So it's a navigational challenge, which is, the fourth sport of adventure racing, or the fifth, I don't know, third, first, whichever category you want to put it in. It really, I guess, inspires navigational choices. Not all the checkpoints are in like the most, amazing location, but it gets you through an amazing location or gets you to, or around something like that. So you'll see it. The checkpoint itself isn't always on like the peak of the most beautiful mountain in the world or anything like that, but some are.
So let me ask you this question, and we'll use some visual imagery here. And this is not a binary question, A or B. There are some races that are foot races.
Yes.
Right. It's a point-to-point race where it's the fastest team with the fastest nav is going to bing, 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 go through the course.
Sure.
And then there are some races that are more like chess matches, that racers and teams are going to come to inflection points during the race where they'll look at the map and they'll realize that some checkpoints are mandatory, some are optional. And I don't know how you have that structured for nationals. And they have to make strategic decisions inside the moment on what direction to go. Now, we should point out that it's not always foot races versus chess match. It could be a little bit of both. Yeah. As you sit back and you look at the breadth of the course, recognizing it's point to point, recognizing that there's multiple route choices, it sounds to me like it's going to be that teams are going to have to make some on-the-fly decisions regarding speed, location, navigation, things like that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't know if I can necessarily categorize us as a foot race or, the chess match race. I think it's kind of a combination. I mean, obviously a fast team that's making good nav choices is going to do better than a slow team not making good nav choices. But there's definitely going to be on the fly nav choices. And I think some people are going to probably have a plan at first, and then they're going to get to that area or where that decision is, and they're going to change their plan dependent on the terrain they're in, or the quality of the trail or road or whatever it may be. Sure. I think that there's going to be some on the fly changes.
Sure. The time of day. Right.
Exactly.
When you go to a section at night during the day, It's time and time again, right? You watch races and teams are moving well. The minute the curtain of nighttime falls, everybody slows down.
Sure.
Some teams slow down more than others. I mean, yes. I'm watching Ecuador right now. They're racing down Huaracinchi, and God bless him, Santiago Lopez, heck of a race. If you can ever go race one of his races in Ecuador, listeners, get down there. Great experience. And first off, he's down in the jungle this year. He's not up in the Andes. He's down in the jungle. And those racers are, by the way, they're soaking wet for 5 straight days. God bless them. I mean, all I see them is in boats. I think if they take their bikes out of the boxes, I'll be amazed. And it was amazing to watch the paddling and the trekking, how teams, when nighttime came, they just stopped cold on the water. That race is out there. To your point, those decisions matter when you get to nighttime comes, because they're racing through the night, right? You're starting on Friday morning, you're finishing sometime on Saturday. You have that section. How much, you may not know this answer, but how much daylight versus how long is night that time of year out there?
It's actually, it's pretty equivalent. I believe the nightfall is at 7:30 and sunup is, I think it's around like 6:45 or 7 or something like that. Or not, I think it's like 6:45.
So it's a good 12 hours.
It's basically 12 hours of night and day. So I guess it'd be more like the tropics.
Yeah, that's a pretty good. That's good. Well, that's once again, that's something where teams are going to have to make that adjustment to nighttime. Yeah. Where do you fall in terms of for a race of 30 hours long, with the max 30 hours? And teams aren't going to. Rare is the team that's going to sleep on the course, that's going to stop on the course, right? The teams that end up going the entire distance and hopefully clearing the course, doing well, they're going to go straight through. Based on your own experience, and I like to ask this question of people who have race experience, what do you do in terms of any sort of resting strategy during the race? Would you go the entire time? Now, first off, this is an inside scoop on nationals. This is your own experience in general. What's your play there usually? Is it full bore the entire time? Is it agree to go slower at night? What's going to serve teams best, do you think?
I mean, obviously it's going to be a consensus with the team and how much experience that team has, and how much experience that all those team members have with each other. But I would probably not go full bore the entire time. I'm not that fast or strong. So I would definitely take a little bit of time to chill and eat some food, make sure you have hydration, your nutrition is good. And I mean, with every course, there's going to be sections that you can be a little bit more relaxed in. If you're just going up steep climbs the whole race, that sounds terrible in the first place.
That's just, it's grueling.
That's grueling. That's rough.
That's mean grueling versus fun grueling.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, really taking advantage of that, I guess those easier sections, if you will, if there's kind of a gentle road that you're running or biking down, or you can paddle and, one or two of your teammates can pull for a little bit and you can chill and then you switch off. Yeah. I mean, I don't know of a whole lot of teams that go hard for 30 hours, maybe like Avaya or something.
Well, and what they most likely do is, and I think this is an important thing to point out for those who want to make the jump, because 24 to 30 hours is very often the jump that the newer racer makes. Because racing 8 to 15 to 13 hours feels like a lot, right? Yeah. The jump to 24 to 30 is an even bigger thing, and I think that it's worth our while to point out to the newer racers. And I encourage anybody who's listening, if you have the time and the capacity, get a team together and get out there for this race. Yep. This is going to be a heck of a race. It's going to be memorable. I've seen, only what the public has seen of the course, and what I've seen really speaks to the quality of the course and Yishai's race direction. from a strategic perspective, I think that what the Avais of the world do well, and it's a good piece of advice we hear time and time again, is that they make very good use of their transition times.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
As is shared by Joel Ford, and Joel Ford is going to come on with his girlfriend Kim. They just did the Northern Forest Canoe Trail. They're a guest coming up in a few weeks. Joel pointed out to me one time that if you do a 12-hour race and if you waste 5 minutes every hour, you've given back an hour of your race.
Yeah.
Right. And so the trick is consistent, steady movement the entire time. And for a race like nationals, where there's honor and glory on the line, this is the national championship. You have to make judicious use of your time.
Absolutely.
Have you found as a race director that you want to push teams out of transition when they're lollygagging? It's like, guys, you're tapping your watch.
I haven't found that. I've seen some of the shorter races I've put on. I've seen some people like sitting down and having like deli sandwiches. And I'm like, dude, this is like a 6-hour race. What are you doing?
We got to go.
Like, move.
You're tapping your watch.
So I've seen that. But yeah, I mean, transition areas and transitioning, it's really, I think a big part of that is having your gearboxes organized well, and just knowing where stuff is, knowing what's coming next, and being able to just toss stuff in your bag and move quickly. I think that saves a lot of time. The other thing is, I mean, TAs are, you've been out, you're cold, you're wet, whatever. You're just like, oh, I just need to sit somewhere that's comfortable for a minute. And so that's a big invitation to spend a lot of time in a TA.
I hope he's listening. John Neely of the New York Adventure Racing Association says, don't go near the fire pit bad. He calls it pillow rock. Like a ship banging into the rocks. Like, don't go anywhere near the fire. Like that will, and that's really good advice. Like if there's a fire going, don't get within 10 feet of it, because it pulls you in, and next thing you know, you're missing all the cutoffs. Another good piece of advice that I see very often is that teams they'll tape on the inside of their bins a race schematic, and they'll know what's next. And they'll have, and another part too, in terms of nutrition, they'll have bags of like certain hours. Is it a 3-hour bag, a 6-hour bag, a 12-hour? And they just take a bag and they go. And that really adds up.
That's a great idea.
If a newer team wanted to jump into nationals, if they're listening to this right now and they're going to share it with their friends and say, let's give this a shot. Yeah. While there's no official support for newer teams in terms of mentorship and in terms of, is it safe to say that if a team gives nationals a shot, and if they're on the newer end, that they could certainly reach out to the race direction and they can get some advice and some guidance?
Yeah. I'm not going to give away the course, but I will definitely give away tips. I'll help as much as I can. I have a pretty decent network of pretty experienced adventure racers that I might be able to connect them with. To take them under their wing, give a little bit of mentorship, whatever. But this race, past races, we have a lot of more of the beginner racers as well, and we want to grow the community. We're not here to try and put on the hardest race that 2 people are going to finish or something like that. It's to grow the sport. Especially out here in California, there's not a lot of races. I think we're one of 2 races in California this year. So that's, there's not a lot. So we want to grow that and make the community larger.
And to your credit, that's there are races that will absolutely clobber you. Right. Yes. This is where the footnotes, go check out Expedition Oregon. God bless Jason and Chelsea and Darren and Daniel. It's a hell of a race. And they call themselves America's toughest race. So they're not exactly hiding their cards. Yeah. They're telling you, they're going for. ATR, America's toughest race. Yep. And you know exactly what you get. And so to your point, in terms of the American West and building the sport, and Katie Farrington, who was just on, talked about it also. I think what the American West struggles with, the reason why the races are smaller, is that there's a lot of choice out there, a lot of different things to do. Mm-hmm. And as a result, people are just in the mountains doing their thing, and adventure racing doesn't really exist inside that culture. They have a million other options outdoors to go and do, which is so ironic. The fact that the biggest race in the country is in the Midwest. Red Mountain Racing has like 500 people come out to their races. I mean, if 500 people come out, you'd have a heart attack.
We don't have enough boats.
Exactly. You need a bigger boat. And you mentioned the idea of hooking up with a more experienced racers. Untamed New England in 2018, Grant Killian, which is my token Grant Killian reference I make one every episode. Grant Killian connected newer racers with experienced teams, and they had set interview, conversation, meeting times. We were using Zoom before Zoom was the whole world, and that really came a long way. And so to that point, if someone wants to give the race a shot, they could certainly reach out to you. They could reach out to Garrison and say, listen, I'm finding that I can be free on September 16th or 17th, and I want to come out and give Nationals a shot. Can you connect me with somebody? In terms of logistics, bike boxes, not bike boxes.
No, you don't need a bike box. We'll transport them without a bike box. So no worries on that. Obviously, if you're flying in, you'll have to have a bike in a box. And then
what's the fly-in? Where do they fly into?
So we're trying to organize a bus actually from LAX. I mean, it's a huge airport. You can fly from pretty much anywhere. From there, it's about a 4 to 5 hour drive on the bus, or you can rent a car, do whatever you want up to Bishop. There is a closer airport in Reno, Nevada. However, Reno is a much smaller airport, so flights into it are going to be a little bit more limited. So USARA will be posting about the shuttle bus coming up. So if somebody does want to do that, it's going to take care of transportation issues for everybody, which is
that's great.
Pretty nice.
Yeah, I mean the hardest part of racing sometimes is getting to the race. Connections, and I mean you can write a book about the crazy stories that people talk about. Patagonia a couple years ago, some team, their bikes didn't show up. They had to fly up to Bolivia to go get the bikes, and they came down, and Lars's bike Friendless Mountains never left Copenhagen. It came on day 3. I mean, getting the gear there is just the whole thing. So credit to USARA for easing that logistical challenge of that. Recognizing it's a 24 to 30 hour race. Tell us a bit on about the other parts of if someone wants to come out and do the race, most likely they're going to come out for a week, an extended period of time. What possible can they do on either end of the race? What else is out there for them?
Bishop and Mammoth are outdoor paradise. Mount Whitney, the tallest mountain in the contiguous U.S., is right outside of Bishop. It's 14,000 something feet. So you can go up that. Mammoth has a huge mountain bike park. It's all lift accessed, so you can cheat and just go uphill, just bomb downhill. Sounds
great to me. Sign me
up. There's tons of climbing. It's one of the climbing destinations of the world. I'm a climber, so there's so many spots. There's bouldering, there's trad climbing, there's sport climbing, and the geology is really interesting because on the western side of the river, it's all granite, and on the eastern side, it's all volcanic tuff. So you get the two types of rock to climb on. There's lakes, there's paddling, there's fishing. It's a world-class fishing destination along the Owens River.
Gotcha. There's Reno. You can go make a donation to the casinos if you want to.
Yeah, it's about a 4-hour drive, but yeah, you can go to Reno. Vegas is about 6 hours away. So if you want to go to Vegas, there's endless hiking.
It sounds like an amazing playground. You must be so excited to put a race on here.
Yeah. It's so exciting.
I mean, just the idea that you're creating this world-class race, right?
Yeah.
In an amazing destination, and you're bringing the world to it. It must be something else for you to be talking about it.
No, it's incredible to be out there. I mean, just being able to go out and scout in it is, you're just like, wow, this is a place. And it's almost hard because there's so many trails, there's so much land, there's so many options. And so narrowing it down can be a bit challenging.
Well, it's almost, it's like going to a candy store, you have too much choice.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And sometimes in the American East, where we have our parks are somewhat limited and our choices, sometimes we run out of, if we return to some races year after year, you're going there.
Yeah,
because you run it because of the population density. Whereas out west, you probably struggle with so many choices, so many things to do.
Yeah. Surprisingly, the West is very challenging to get permits through. And then the other holdup is a lot of the land is wilderness designated. So you can't have competitive events in wilderness. So those are kind of the two I guess, controlling issues.
Gotcha. And I'm assuming you can't have the competitive events because they want to avoid and leave no trace, the wear and tear on the land.
It's the Wilderness Act. It's a congressional act, and it basically says no motorized vehicles. You can't have bikes in wilderness areas. You can't do competitive events in wilderness areas. It's a pretty strong regulation. I mean, it keeps it, beautiful.
Beautiful, right? Yeah, that's the trade-off, right?
Exactly. So it's amazing, but there is that trade-off.
The as we talk a bit more about the race and your own experience as a race director and as a racer, clearly, because teams want to do well at the national championships and because they want to push themselves, most likely there may be some challenges on the team dynamic. And you had said earlier the idea of you want to bring 3 co-ed teams of 3 out there to compete in the race. In your experience, when things go off the rail for teams, what usually causes that to happen? What have you seen in your experience?
I think that when teams are not unified in their objective, like if one person's like, I'm going to be podium, and the other person's just like, I just want to finish, and the other person's in between, you're not a real team. You're not united. So there's going to be problems there. I think it's really just not having a mutual understanding of each other's goals, of each other's skills, and of each other's abilities. So, I'd say that's probably what causes it. That's the root cause of everything.
It's the idea that communication has to occur before the race and during the race.
Absolutely.
And if people stop talking during it, and you've probably seen that in transition, teams come rolling in. Mm-hmm. And the minute you look at them, you're like, oh, this is not going well for them, right? You just like they're doing the whole kind of not talking to each other, and one person takes their bin off to the side, and it's almost time for an in-race therapy session with them to figure it out. Yeah,
I mean, it's such adventure racing is really interesting. It's such an intense relationship that. It's relationship therapy.
Well, we talked about having therapy sessions on Zoom. Yeah. The idea, like I've had interviews where people there's one interview I have, one of my favorites. I won't say who it is. Yeah. I spoke to the racer for an hour and a half before I hit record.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because they had to process it out. And I was like, can I record this now? And they were like, go for it. Yeah. And you're right. I think the intense insular nature, which is why I love adventure racing, because it's this intense snapshot into human nature.
Absolutely.
Right. And it brings it alive. And we create these micro communities of intensity that have to, all of a sudden, it's like 30 hours of your life, your cell phone's turned off, you can't talk to your spouse. It's you, your teammates, the maps, and the course.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be very intense for people. It can be overwhelming for some people. But generally people that get through it, that it's such a positive thing, and it stands out as kind of one of those like little glimmers and gems in their lives. And it definitely forges very strong relationships.
Chris Kalous runs a podcast called the Enormocast. He's a climber. And it's one of my favorite podcasts. And as someone who doesn't climb, he's fascinating to listen to because he has these wide-ranging conversations across a variety of topics. And one thing that climbers talk about when they have these epics, right? They use the word to describe when they have an epic, a big day. Yeah. When they have an epic, they describe it as war stories without the war. That there's that shared experience, which I think that you see that in a national race. You see that in a race of your caliber, that the teams will have those when things go right, when things go wrong, they come to a dead end. They go in the wrong way.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what you're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk to me a bit about, before we end, I appreciate your time. We're getting a little closer to the end here. As the race comes together and the race sort of is forming in your own mind, what do you think, what should teams be doing right now at home, besides listening to this podcast? Thank you very much for listening.
Of course.
Which is the most important thing to do, is listen to the podcast. And if I have sponsors, call them and thank them. I have to get sponsors to do that, but that's a whole different story. What should teams be doing right now? It's late July, the race September 16th. What would you say to the racer sitting home right now, knowing that the race is a little bit under 2 months away? Where do you think they should be?
If they don't have a team sorted already, obviously they need to get a team sorted. Then I think that they need to be spending some good time on their bikes. If they can get up to a higher elevation area, just to see how that impacts them, see what effect that has on their body, on their breathing, on their performance. I would do that. I don't think a lot of teams are going to be able to get up like a week beforehand. It's hard to take that much time off, but just to have that knowledge and understanding of what the effect of altitude has on you is good, because then you can kind of judge and be like, okay, I know what's going on right now. This is the hard part. I'm going to get through it. Just slow it down a little bit. Next. Yeah, I think that those are like the critical things for
you
national
mentioned the idea of team. You have to get along with your teammates. Not to get too Freudian on you. You have mentioned bikes repeatedly during this podcast.
Yes.
Well, I think it's worth. I think that's for the folks who are sitting at home. Get those bike those dialed in. Get used to your bike.
Yeah, definitely bikes dialed in. Check your brake pads.
Brake pads, very nice. And you also said there was a net loss in elevation. So
there is.
Yeah, there is. And you mentioned the idea of elevation, of being prepared to go up and down. Mm-hmm. The completely unscientific experience. I'm an N of 1. I've done the thing where I've gone to elevation, I've landed, and I've gone right up. I've climbed right away, and I've read that that's actually one strategy. Mm-hmm. And then if you get within a few days within it, like 3 to 4 days is kind of like the middle ground. Yeah. A week is good. Yeah. So I think teams have to figure that out. It's only oxygen. It's only elevation. You'll be fine. It's just your head hurts and off you go. I mean, exactly. And it's not so high. We're not talking. Yeah. It's not so high that you're talking about having like major significant issues. It's just going to be thin air. You have to get used to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the high point is about 11,000 feet.
Okay. So, which is going to feel like something for someone who lives at 2 feet. It's going to feel like a thing.
Yeah. You'll definitely feel it. I will say that, but it's not. We're not at 16, 17, 20, whatever it might be.
So let's play a guessing game here without naming teams, right? Because that's not fair, because you love all of your children equally. So let's be honest. Absolutely. What is the winning race time going to be?
I'm going to say right around 23 hours.
23 hours. Okay.
For full course,
23 hours will be the winning time.
Yeah. And the way I usually run races is we have pro points and we have mandatory points.
Say more about that.
Well, the mandatory points are going to get you from the start to the finish. You're going to have a great experience. You're going to enjoy a lot of the same experiences that the faster teams would do. And then there's pro points. The pro points are really meant for the faster, more elite teams. And it's going to be a longer course. It's going to be a little bit harder. But basically the idea is that if you're a beginner or a veteran team, you'll all kind of finish around the same time. So there's kind of more of a celebration when you do finish. And it's basically to cater the event to both people, or to both categories, all categories. The other thing is I don't like doing cutoffs. So they're like, oh, if you're not at TA7 by 6 o'clock, that's not an actual cutoff. I'm just getting an example. Then you have to walk down this road. So the pro points allow the more beginner teams to still experience the course and not be penalized.
Gotcha. So and what you want to do is you don't want someone to come out there and do the race and get clobbered, and you also don't want to blow the newer teams out the back of the engine. Yeah. Right. It's not fair to them and it's a good point to make when you say it's a point-to-point course. Mm-hmm. It's worth pointing out that the point-to-point, you're going from point A to point B over a long, but there's different route choices inside that point-to-point that teams can make decisions.
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned before about the canyoneering section. Certifications required, equipment required, or are you going to have people on site to walk them through it?
Yeah, it's a non-technical canyoneering section. So there's no ropes in it. It's fine. It's just more like going through river, scrambling on the side, but nothing. There's no super rapid water or anything like that.
Wetsuits, dry suits, or just what you're wearing?
Don't need them. Yeah.
What's the average? What's the temperature swing going to be, do you think?
Because of the elevation changes, it could go from freezing to 100 degrees.
Okay. bench racing, right? That's the deal,
Yeah.
right? That's what you have to do. You have to be prepared, right? I mean, and anybody who goes into a race, you know, the same old story, right? And all teams go through this. It's the weight of what you have to carry versus the speed that you want to travel versus how safe you want to be, right? There's that magic formula. And if you choose to carry less gear, you know, obviously you have to carry the mandatory gear, and that list exists, and that's non-negotiable, right? And I don't care if it's 100 degrees. If it says raincoat, you're putting a raincoat in your bag. That's the way it goes. But once you pass through mandatory gear, there's decisions to make regarding food, water, and additional gear that teams are going to prepare for the fact that they could be shivering in a canyon at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they could be sweltering on a hilltop at 10 o'clock in the morning. And that's that's the choice they have to make. Yeah, absolutely. I find that newer racers, present company included, when I was fresh new, was that you packed your fears. That you would pack, like, if you were scared of running out of food, you carried it. I have finished races with more food that it's just, you just think to yourself, and the clothing and things like that.
Yeah. It's and until you have the experience, it's hard to pack accurately, you know, be like, oh, I need exactly this much food for exactly this much time. I mean, we do before each leg, you know, and even closer to that, we will disclose, you know, the duration or the estimated times for things, the terrain and everything like that. So people can, you know, racers can make the best decisions possible, but that's not going to be yet. So,
and I haven't even asked, because I've begun to assume there'll be live tracking for this race.
There is live tracking.
Yeah. I mean, that's become like, I wouldn't even assume there wouldn't be, right? So I'm just confirming there would be live tracking. Is there any sort of, I know USARA has done a really nice job with media. Dave Gedney's done a nice job with them. A lot of good stuff coming out, and this may not be inside you're the race director, right? You're building the course. So you may say, Brian, I don't know the answer to the question. Sure. Will there be analysis of the race during the race? Will there be updates? Will there be the live tracking, or is that sort of still being worked out?
I believe that's the objective. But I can't answer definitively. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think what we have seen in this year in America that with the tracking that's being done, and you know who's doing the tracking for you?
It's it's Mark Harris.
Mark Harris, Adventure Enablers, which is good to hear, because he's done a lot of the bigger races this year. And he'll be a future guest on the Dark Zone. Him and we've been speaking about getting him on and Margot on to talk about, because tracking has just become the most it's one of the nicest developments over the last several years, is the fact that people at home could dot watch, and there's actually a Facebook group called Dot Watchers United, right? Where they sit and they watch the races. Between the dot watching combined with the at-home analysis, combined with the ability to layer the different maps onto the site itself, people at home can get a real sense of the race. And so we're going to see that. We're going to see over those 30 hours, we'll have access to all of that.
Yes.
Nice. Do you want to make any predictions on who might win, or do you want to keep that to yourself? Not really a fair question, but I figured I'd throw it at you. I didn't want to not ask it. You could plead the fifth. You could say
I'm going to plead the fifth on that one. Okay. You know, I don't actually know I don't know all the East Coast teams that are coming out. I don't know. I don't even know a current roster. So
you're just the guy building the course. That's what you are. You're
putting it all together.
That's great.
So we'll see. I know there are some fast teams. So, I mean, I would keep my eye on Bones for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You always have to. If Bones is in the race, you got to keep an eye on him. Absolutely 100%. But I have to tell you that it's been a very, very strong season so far. You know, there's never enough weekends in the year. And I know that the world is going on and there's a lot happening. There's a window to do it. But I think that it's a great time of the year. I think the weather is going to be great. It's September. So it's summer going into fall. There's a lot going in your direction. Yishai, before I let you go, is there any closing thoughts you want to say to the folks who are sitting home thinking about nationals?
Well, I would encourage everybody that is slightly interested in a 24, 30-hour race to sign up. It's going to be a really incredible experience in a really incredible area. So, yeah.
And what I will do is, and I will put up on the show notes for this page for the listeners out there, links to all of the relevant websites and all the contact. And you could always reach out to me, Brian at ardarkzone.com, and I'll get you in touch with Yishai and Garrison. And we definitely want to give Yishai the opportunity to showcase a beautiful part of the country, especially in light of the fact that this is our national championship. So Yishai, thank you very much for coming on the Dark Zone. Best of luck with the racing. Ignore the teams, just build the course.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Brian. Really a pleasure to be here.
Once again, thanks to Yishai for coming onto the Dark Zone to talk about the Adventure Race National Championships. Check those show notes if you want to learn more about the race. We have some links down there. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Dark Zone, feel free to reach out to your streaming platform of choice and leave a review. Any thoughts on guests, feedback, criticisms, adulations, whatever, Brian at ardarkzone.com. Thanks again for being a listener. Have fun racing out there and be safe. Go get them.